My name is Kirk Borger. I am the library director here at the Riverview Public Library. Today we have longtime, 40-plus year resident of Riverview and former city council member, Jack Kesterson, and he is going to talk about some of his experiences, not only in the service, but some of the things that he saw as a child during World War II. So first I'd like to ask you a few questions, just to get to know you there, Jack. Where and when were you born?
I was born September 30th, 1932.
What were your parents' occupations?
My father worked for a company called National Gas Company, and his job took us to several cities. His job was to go into a city, set up the infrastructure so that they could lay gas lines to all the homes, because some of the homes that they had to do had little or no heat at all, and that was his job. We were in Atlanta for a while. From Atlanta we went to Macon, Georgia. Then from Georgia we went to Jacksonville, Florida, the city, and while we were there, he and my mother decided that they wanted to, just on a Sunday, drive out to the beach, and that was called Jacksonville Beach. And they liked it so much that they decided that was where they wanted to stay. And it just so happens that in that city, like so many small towns, during the 40s, the homes were strictly summer homes, and they had little or no heat at all. So he was busy setting up the infrastructure to lay gas lines so that those homes would have gas. I went through school there, and
Is that where you graduated from high school?
yes, I graduated from high school called Duncan U. Fletcher,
In what year?
1952. And I was just a typical B-plus student. I took a lot of science and math classes because I knew I wanted to go, maybe not into the science, but I knew I wanted to go to college, and I had to have had the typical classes to get into college. So that got me in, and like I told you, I was studying broadcast journalism.
At what college?
University of Florida in Gainesville.
How long were you studying broadcast journalism?
I was there 2 years.
Because you entered the Navy, you entered the reserves.
I was in the Naval Reserves.
In 1952.
1952. Gainesville was not my first choice of college.
What was your first choice of college?
Auburn.
In Alabama.
In Alabama. But
why was Auburn your first choice?
well, I had heard that they had a pretty good radio program there, and that's what I wanted. The reason I didn't go to Auburn is, even though I was accepted there, was the fact that they didn't have a naval armory. They did not have a reserve unit in Birmingham. And I did not have a car at that time. And I would have had to have driven quite some distance in Alabama to go to where they had a reserve unit. So when I knew that Gainesville had a unit, that's where I decided to plant my roots, so to speak.
Let's get back to your family.
Okay.
You said they eventually settled in Jacksonville Beach.
Correct.
And your dad worked in basically not city management, but implementing, heating and systems, that kind of thing. What did your mother do?
Well, she was a homemaker for a while, and then she got a job in the post office. which she worked until she retired. And
How many siblings did you have?
with just me, I was
just
only
you, your only
child.
child. Now, when you enlisted in the U.S. Naval Reserves, what were your parents' reactions? Did they say anything?
No, my father was always one. I think my father had a lot of influence on me because even when I was growing up, I had to take jobs that he said gave me character. And I might not have liked the type of work I was doing, but at that time it paid well, and that's what I wanted.
What kind of jobs were those?
Well, I worked as a welder's helper in the shipyard. And I guess you could say I detested that job with a passion, but I stuck it out because, as I told you, it paid good, and at that time, I was looking to help myself through college, to get money to pay for books and supplies. So I stayed with that job until I went to college.
What I should have asked you before is why did you enlist in the Navy,
Oh.
in the Naval Reserves to begin with?
Well, they went on cruises. I just wanted to go on a cruise.
Oh, it was simple as that?
Well, it was that simple that I joined the reserve.
Understood.
But in the reserve, I was studying to be a radio operator on board the ship. And that's what I did when I went on these cruises. I actually worked as a regular naval person while on these cruises. Cruises would go to some places in the Mediterranean. They went to the Caribbean area, and but mostly the one that I enjoyed was the one that went to the Mediterranean. That was, and even that was only like a 3-week cruise.
What kind of ships were these? Were they destroyers? What kind
Well,
of
destroyer on the one that went in the Caribbean. The one that went to the Mediterranean was what they call an attract transport. We had a full complement of Marines on board, and it was our duty to take them to an island, and they would practice landing on the island. There were like 1,150 Marines on board this one ship, so it was quite crowded.
So these were training ships for
Right, it was a
amphibious
training
landings.
ship, right.
What was typically how long? You said the one cruise lasted 3 weeks. Typically, how long did these last?
Well, a long cruise would be a month, and I got paid regular naval pay during that time, but my thoughts still were in broadcast journalism, and so when the cruise ended, I went back to college. I took a break.
You took a break.
Like, these cruises were always in summer.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So
Well,
you're in the
like-
Naval Reserves.
Right,
You're in the Naval Reserves, and then they assign you a ship. You go on the cruise forever, however long. Then you come back, and then you go back to school.
Right.
Do I understand you correctly?
that's correct.
What was, out of the places did you even have time to visit any of these places when
No,
you
not
went out?
really. I went, one of the cruises went to Bermuda, and that was pretty nice because having been from Florida, I was used to sand that was white. In Bermuda, it's pink. It's the color of coral. It was a very interesting island to visit.
Your duties on these cruises, you said radio operator, correct?
Radio operator.
Tell us a little bit about that duty.
Well, the radio operation at that time consisted mostly of it was voice, but it's also something called CW, that's Morse code. And most of the messages were sent because they were encrypted messages, were done in code. And then we would take the encrypted message and put it in language that the people would understand, you know, the commanding officers.
Did you enjoy your time on the ship?
When we went on a cruise, there was always somebody that I knew from college on the cruise also. And he was probably on there the same way I was, because one of the reasons why a lot of people, myself included, joined the reserve was that during that time there was a heavy draft going because they were in the midst of the Korean War, and this gave you a deferment. You got a deferment both as a student and for being in a reserve.
So you go back to college.
Yes.
How long did you stay back in college? And this was the University of Florida.
Right. I stayed there almost a year, and my unit got activated. Well, I was supposed to fly out of Grozil, and this was on would have been on what's called a familiarization flight. We were going to fly to Miami, and from Miami to another island. And when everybody boarded the airplane, the CO came on board and said the flight had been canceled because of a hurricane down in Florida. And so we would not be going down there. That night, I happened to meet my wife. This is my wife, Georgina, whose name, we call her Georgie for short. She's the one I was lucky enough to meet at that dance at NAS Grozil.
Yes, he was lucky.
So then, planes canceled.
Plane canceled.
Planes canceled.
I met this young girl.
Where?
Pardon?
Where? Tell us about the circumstances.
Okay. It was at the NCO office rec room in the basement. They had a band, you know, it's like just a club. And she and some other girls came over that night, and I walked across the door, the store, and I asked her to dance, and then from the rest is history after that.
Well, a bunch of us girls would go on Saturday night, and we'd all go together, and we'd go to the dance, and we would pick up these sailors.
Oh, and that was here at the
Right, that was the
Naval Air
Grozil
Station. You were supposed to fly to Miami, but
Right.
it got canceled because of the hurricane in Miami.
Yeah.
Now tell us how you got from Florida or wherever you were stationed to Grozil.
From Florida, I went to Charleston, South Carolina. Had a duty station there. From Charleston, I went to Norfolk, Virginia. And from Norfolk, Virginia, I went to Great Lakes Naval Training Center. And from there, that's where I was going to get the billet on the Rhine River Patrol, but instead they sent me to Grozil, an island in the river.
Just in the Detroit River, not the Rhine River.
Right.
What were your duties at the Grozil Naval Air Station?
Ground electronics group. We took care of all the electronics and all the vehicles such as the crash unit, the hospital had an ambulance, we took care of that. We took care of all the electronics in the control tower. And there was another group that took care of electronics in the airplanes. They were called air electronics. And I spent my time there until I got discharged.
You were discharged in 1956.
Yeah.
What did you do after you were discharged?
Okay, first job I had, I worked for Spear Iran Electronics. And they had, my duties there was, I was assigned to General Motors building. They had a huge computer complex there. And I took care of all the machines. And I was scheduled to go to an advanced school on computers, but I went to work for Burroughs Corporation. Why? Because Burroughs paid more money than what I was making at Spear Iran. Then that's when I went to Burroughs, that's when I entered the Detroit Engineering School. And I was going to school full-time at night, working during the day and going at night. And from there, I got the job at Martin Marietta in Orlando, Florida. I was down there 3 years and worked at the Cape and was in charge of a group. Well, when I went to the Cape, was assistant launch control director, and that job, if you've ever seen on television and heard, there's always a person in the background said, the missile is 135 nautical miles down here. That's the assistant launch control director that you're hearing.
So it was you.
It was me.
And when you say the Cape, just so anybody
Cape
watching, Cape Canaveral, right?
Cape, right.
And how long were you there?
3 years.
And then what did you do?
Came back to Michigan. Then I got a job at Ford Motor Company. I worked in scientific research. I worked in product development. Well, anyway, I worked there almost 31 years till I retired.
What year did you retire?
January 1, 97.
And what have you been doing since you've retired?
I choose just to stay at home.
Let's go back. You were telling me that you had some interesting experiences during
okay.
World War II. How old were you?
Well, I was like 11 years old when all that happened. There was a lot of development being done because at this time, Second World War was starting. See, this was 1942. In 1942, the government had great interest in Florida because of its closeness to the ocean and the shape of its land. In fact, cities were literally, this is a figure of speech, literally being built overnight, cities were, to accommodate the service personnel who would bring their families with them to serve in the Army or the Navy. In Jacksonville, there was a huge Naval Air Station built. And at the beach, there was a seaport built at a little town called Mayport. And there was so much development being made that it was almost like traffic was gridlocked. And like what I was telling you, it's far different today, you know. Today it's all high rises, all mega highways. And everybody was adjusting to one another, really. On April the 11th, 1942, the reason I know the exact date is because this is forever stuck in my mind. We had gone to the show. The local theater on Tuesday used to show double features. We watched the show and were coming out, and as we came out of the theater, this terrific explosion, the whole heavens just opened up orange-wide, and we found out that a oil tanker was coming up the coast, was torpedoed. The submarine torpedoed the tanker on the starboard side, which is the right side of the ship, and we went down to the beach because it was only like walking down a block. And when we got down there were hundreds of people, and we could actually see, we knew that the submarine was on the other side of the ship, because if the ship is traveling from south to north, the right side has to be. Well, he torpedoed him, and you could actually see the shells bouncing off the surface of this tanker. And then we were about to witness something, although at that time we really didn't realize it. The captain of this U-boat, he maneuvered the sub around this oil tanker so that he was broadside, if you can imagine this, to the beach. In other words, he had placed the submarine in harm's way. And they were shelling the tanker at that time. And then we could see, because the submarine was fully silhouetted now, we could see the crew from the subboat on the deck, and the deck gun firing at the oil tanker. It had a second explosion, and these people that worked on the tanker are now jumping into the water. And the water at this time, with the second explosion, even the surface of the water was on fire. We later found out, would take a couple of years to find this out. We found out